Okay, let's jump right into this. You know, I always used to think of pastoral care as, well, just a friendly chat over coffee. But looking through the internal training materials for Restoring Hope Ministries, or RHM, I stumbled onto something absolutely fascinating. We're looking at this incredible intersection where deep spiritual compassion literally collides with incredibly strict legal, ethical, and tech protocols. If you've ever wondered how modern ministries actually handle complex, heavy issues like trauma or addiction without accidentally crossing into unlicensed clinical practice, well, stick around because we're going to unpack exactly how they pull this off. To do that, we're going to follow a trainee's journey right through the RHM system. We'll start with the high cost of care, figure out the boundaries between biblical and clinical scope, learn how to document everything properly, dive into safety and reporting, and finally wrap up with their super strict tech security system. So, step one, the high cost of care. It's all about the rigorous standards required for this genuinely sacred work. Now, what really surprised me right out of the gate is the intense coursework required before someone can even apply to serve at RHM. We aren't talking about a casual weekend retreat or just signing your name on a clipboard in the church lobby. As the training material makes super clear, sitting with suffering people demands deep, deep preparation. Because let's be honest, zeal just doesn't automatically equal competence. Having good intentions, that's great, but it's nowhere near enough when you're sitting across from vulnerable individuals carrying heavy trauma histories. Actually, this perfectly illustrates the vast difference between someone who just really wants to help, your casual advice giver, and a fully formed RHM biblical counselor. To even get a seat at the table, applicants have to pass doctoral-level self-study courses. We're talking classes like Biblical Ethics for Christ-Centered Care, which actually carries a 90% mastery expectation and requires a live oral defense. Crazy, right? They literally have to prove they understand boundaries, informed consent, and how to faithfully use Scripture without it ever turning into a tool for manipulation. All right, moving into phase 2, biblical versus clinical scope. This is all about navigating those tricky Wisconsin legal guardrails. It's honestly fascinating how RHM protects everyone involved here. And the whole thing hinges on Wisconsin Statute 457.04. Basically, this law strictly restricts who can legally call themselves a psychotherapist or a professional counselor. So RHM explicitly drills into its staff that while pastoral counsel is absolutely valid and legally protected, they must never ever drift into claiming they provide licensed mental health treatment. They have to stay strictly in their ministry lane. Just look at how they translate the terminology to prevent any of that clinical role drift. Words like therapist, diagnosis, or treatment plan, absolutely off limits for non-licensed pastoral staff. Scratch those entirely. Instead, they use terms that accurately reflect their scope, like biblical counselor, reported struggle, and biblical care plan. It's a total vocabulary shift. And think about why this matters. If you walk into a room expecting licensed psychotherapy, but you get pastoral counsel instead, that is a massive breach of trust. RHM teaches that precision protects everyone. Using the exact right vocabulary isn't just about ticking a legal compliance box. It's fundamentally an issue of biblical ethics and honesty. Setting the correct expectations from the very first session is absolutely crucial to keeping the care entirely above board. Okay, section 3. Now that we understand the legal scope, let's look at how they actually document this care using the SOAP method, preserving the structure while swapping out the vocabulary. So RHM utilizes the standard SOAP acronym. And no, not the kind you wash your hands with. It's the exact same structure you'd find in a hospital or therapist's office, but adapted specifically for ministry. Subjective is simply what the counselee says in their own words. Objective covers what the counselor actually did. Assessment is a synthesis of the spiritual and relational dynamics. Again, strictly without making any clinical diagnoses. And finally, the plan outlines practical next steps, like prayer, homework, or whether supervision is needed. Now, here is a really cool detail. RHM has this unique rule of using what they call scripture parentheticals to justify their interventions right in the objective section of their notes. So they don't just write down, "I listened." They'll document that they used attentive listening and restrained speech, and then pop James 1:19 right there in parentheses. It anchors the documentation. It explicitly defines the action as a biblical intervention rather than some regulated clinical technique. Check out this comparison. It instantly shows how to translate a legally risky clinical note into a precise biblical care record. The avoid example accidentally makes it sound like the counselor is conducting medical treatment. Yikes. But the better example It documents robust, profound care. They listen to distress, explored fear through scripture, discussed referral options, but it does all of that entirely within the safe, legal boundaries of pastoral soul care. Moving right along to Section 4, Safety, Escalation, and Reporting. Knowing exactly when to ask for help. We've reached a critical area where the stakes literally could not be higher. Every single trainee has to internalize this core question. When must a counselor consult, refer, or immediately escalate? Because listen, biblical counselors are absolutely not exempt from safety and legal obligations. RHM explicitly teaches that a counselor's spiritual zeal must never, ever bypass physical safety. Crucially, if a counselor encounters imminent danger, suspected abuse of a child or elder, severe impairment, or a dangerous substance relapse, they cannot just handle it alone. These specific triggers mandate immediate escalation to a supervisor, protective authorities, or emergency services. You don't just try to pray away a life-threatening crisis. You act decisively to protect the vulnerable. Because trusting God in the counseling room works hand in hand with fulfilling your legal duties, Wisconsin law actually includes clergy right in the mandated reporter framework for things like child abuse. RHM makes absolutely sure every worker knows exactly who must report, what must be reported, and how to properly document that reporting action, all while understanding the specific limits of confidentiality. And finally, Section 5. Let's look at how they protect all this sensitive data with the Tech Double Lock system. I've got to say, it honestly shocked me to see IT protocols this incredibly strict outside of like a bank or a hospital. RHM employs this serious double lock security standard for any temporary staging of data. If a counselor is drafting a note, they are strictly prohibited from saving client info on personal desktops or unsecured flash drives. Lock 1 is strict access control. We're talking multi-factor authentication. Lock 2 requires file-level encryption and strictly managed devices. To actually make this work in practice, there's a rigorous 5-step workflow. The counselor first generates and reviews the draft, exports it safely to an encrypted staging area only, uploads it directly to the official Theranos client portal, summarizes it, and then, this is the absolute big one, step 5, they must delete and purge those temporary files completely from their local machine. Because, as this training quote nails it, the safest duplicate file is the one that no longer exists. Once that official record is secure in Theranos, immediately wiping out the temporary working files is a total non-negotiable. You have to empty your local downloads folder and your recycle bin. Why? To prevent highly sensitive personal care notes from just sitting abandoned on some laptop hard drive where they could eventually be compromised. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we've seen how RHM demands deep ethical formation, careful legal terminology, disciplined documentation, rapid safety escalation, and lockdown IT workflows. It leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. If true care requires protecting the vulnerable at all costs, are well-intentioned ministries actually doing more harm than good if they lack this level of precision? Something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with me today.